Welcome to the Port to Port podcast. This week we're joined by Kyle Pemberton. Kyle joins us from Houston, Texas, where he finds himself a couple of months into a journey where he's starting his new business. Most recently, Kyle was the Vice President of Engineering for SEACOR Marine. In his 19 years in his career, he's served as pretty much everything from a naval architect, class surveyor, vessel manager, and most recently, obviously, as VP. Kyle started his journey as a naval architect and followed his father's footsteps, what we'll hear much more about in the episode, when he went to Newcastle University, moving from Trinidad at the tender age of 19. We've known each other for many, many years, and it's great to have him on the podcast. So without further ado, I hope you enjoy. So, Kyle Pemberton, thank you very much for being in the Port to Port pod. Pleasure. I've obviously done a slight introduction for you, but if you don't mind, you'll do yourself more justice if you can take it away, my friend.
Good morning, good afternoon, good night to everyone. My name is Kyle Pemberton, as Gordon mentioned. Originally from Trinidad and Tobago. Studied at Newcastle University. While I was at Newcastle University, it was actually called University of Newcastle upon Tyne, and then they switched that. And then I started my degree in Bachelor's of Engineering in Naval Architecture. And again, while I was doing my degree, they switched that as well, and they switched it to Marine Technology with honors in Naval Architecture. So that's my degree for a Bachelor's of Engineering in Marine Technology with honors in Naval Architecture. Started my career in Trinidad and as a naval architect, and sitting at that desk doing stability booklets and stuff was not enough for me. I had a desire to be out on the field. But then you'll hear later on why I came back into the office very, very quickly. Worked with class. I have roughly 20 years experience working with class, working on the owner side of things, getting that broad spectrum of the maritime industry from the regulatory side as well as the owner side. Not unfortunately, but I started to dive deeper into the oil and gas sector. So I've worked on many different aspects of the oil and gas sector, ranging from pipeline vessels, subsea type of work, EPCI type of work, to drilling, to just all simple offshore transportation. So, very, very deep into the oil and gas industry. But that's not said, even with the class, I was involved with containers, cruise ships.
Yeah.
So very, very broad spectrum of the maritime industry, working from both the owner side and also the class side. Of recent, I've started getting into the consultancy side of things, honing my background from working with in the executive side of the companies, putting together strategies to how companies should be set up from a maritime point of view. So that's where I pivoted into this type of role, where I opened my own organization and started to work on what I call execution as a service. Again, funny joke. I told one of my friends about this execution as a service, and he thought I was a hitman.
I know it does. It's got a nice ring to it.
So he's like, I'll call you if I need anything. I was like, please don't. Yeah.
Make sure he doesn't do it in WhatsApp.
Exactly. Let's get burner phones to talk about this.
Superb. So obviously, like, I'm trying to actually think. So I think the first time we spoke, I think you were just finishing up with, you'd either just moved to McDermott or you were finishing up with DMV. I can't really remember, if I'm honest, man, but it's obviously gone back a good few years anyway. So,
It's
but if
been
we
a
go
while.
if we go right back, so I've never actually asked you this. When you went to Newcastle, did you come straight from Trinidad or were you in the States?
I came straight from Trinidad, actually. Yeah.
Right. And what
Um.
what made you pick
uh,
Newcastle?
well, my dad actually went to Newcastle University. He was also an engineer. He
Nice.
was in civil engineering. and he actually got deeper into to waste management.
Right.
So he worked for like World Bank and Caribbean Development Bank um as their one of their engineers on staff, and he used to go around around the Caribbean giving governments engineering advice on how to manage their waste management systems. So
Mhm.
he was there, you know, at Newcastle. He spoke about it. I actually didn't pick Newcastle. I went down to Plymouth University
Yeah.
to start my degree. So he took us down to Plymouth, and I was there, got registered, spent the night there, got up in the morning, and said to him, "I think I want to go to Newcastle." So he hurriedly got on the phone with the admin person over there, and he asked them, do you still have a place there for him? And they said yes. And funny, no lie, we hopped on a train from Plymouth over to Newcastle, and we never looked back. And he was overjoyed because
Yeah.
he got his son is actually going to the same school,
Yeah,
and it was
man.
an opportunity for him to walk around and show me all the places. Mind it, he didn't remember anything about Newcastle, and he kept going on the wrong streets and stuff. But I mean, it developed a lot by then.
Yeah,
But
totally different place.
yeah, he was like, this was not here. So it was funny about that, but it was basically stepping into the path that my father took, even though it was it was slightly different, but it was, ended up in Newcastle. How I ended up in naval architecture was, I was a Sea Scout in Trinidad.
Right.
So I was always underwater, always had a affinity towards big vessels and stuff like that, driving past on the ports and looking at these grand,
Yeah,
grand
yeah.
size things. So always had an interest in it. Found out from a buddy that his uncle did it, and he was living pretty nice. So I said that I decided that this is the path that I would take. I had a love for it, so it was a really really simple choice for me.
Yeah, fair enough. Fair enough.
Mhm.
It's cool to hear. And I can only imagine how proud your dad would have been as well as like the day you graduated. So see when you graduated then, what was your, I don't know what the visa situation would be back then. Did you want to stay in the UK or did you just want to go back home or what was your,
So my wife now was she became my girlfriend while I was at university, and so I was thinking about love at that point in time, and all the fun that comes along with having a girlfriend. So
obviously you're
uh,
still
you know.
thinking about love. It wasn't just a thing when you're younger, of course.
Yeah, obviously. So yeah, I was so desperate to get back to Trinidad, to start something with her and whatever, and so I wasn't thinking of staying in the UK at that point in time. Um, I think looking back on it, perhaps I should have stayed, you know, but nevertheless, I got back to Trinidad, and it set me on a trajectory that brought me here today. So,
Yeah,
you
yeah.
know, no regrets at all.
No, definitely, mate. You've had some career. That's amazing. So, see, obviously, when you came back, then is Tsunami Marine? Is that in Trinidad? Is that your
Yes,
yeah? So your
yes,
first round was obviously back in. So you came in at be a kind of graduate naval arc. Then what kind of stuff were you working on?
correct. So, remember I mentioned to you that my friend's uncle was living pretty nice. He was the owner of Tsunami
Ah,
Marine.
right. Yeah.
So I worked with him. He had his company actually was a bit of everything, to be honest. It was a jack of all trades. So he had a survey unit that gone out to vessels and do inspections and on behalf of flag states, amongst other things, insurance and everything. And then he did actually the naval architectural work. So I was one of I think at that point in time I was the second in the country, but third naval architect for Trinidad.
Right.
So yeah, so he was quite happy to bring someone on who had the schooling who couldn't do things like that. So I did a bit of both. So I was out on the field doing measurements and stuff. There's a whole bunch of barges in Trinidad that didn't have stability booklets, amongst other things. So I was out doing inspections, but then a big part of it was also me getting in to the office and actually doing stability booklets and stuff, you know. So I was
Yeah.
preparing a lot of stability booklets for those vessels and um, you know, applying both the field side of things as well as the office side of things. So that was you know, it was a good introduction to the world of work. You know, coming out of university, you have you tend to think that you know
Yeah.
everything, but then
Yeah.
when
It's
you
funny, innit? It makes me cringe seeing I think back of myself. I'm like, oh geez, Gordon, man. You don't have a
yeah,
clue.
I don't have a clue, you know, and it was kind of eye-opening. You know, you drive past those vessels and stuff, and you think, oh, yeah, and then you know you tend to think, oh yeah, I could buy this, that, and the other. Then when you actually do get into like ballast tanks and stuff, you're like, whoa, wait a minute.
Aye. Different kettle of fish. So you went so from there then. So how does this come about? So you're the third naval architect in Trinidad, and then you end up as a new building in Korea.
Yeah, so I was actually uh, called by DNV. So I was actually home that day and just sitting around. I took a day off and I sat around, you know, watching television. Uh, Not a very good thing to do, but I did it anyways. And again, it ties back to Newcastle. So there was a guy in Trinidad, a guy called Ian Maxwell from Newcastle, living in Trinidad doing surveys with DNV. He had a company down there that did surveys, and he was sending his son to school to Newcastle to do
Mhm.
naval architecture. So he was there chatting with this same admissions guy who my dad chatted with,
Right.
and he was explaining to him that you know there there aren't there are not many people in Trinidad who could actually do surveys because of the lack of the technical competence in that area of naval architecture, marine engineering. There wasn't Trinidad eventually created a school called University of Trinidad and Tobago that does a lot of marine stuff, not naval architectures yet, but they're pushing out a lot of seafarers now.
Mhm.
However, so he was there over in England expressing you know the lack of competence out there in Trinidad, and the guy said, well, you know, there's a Trinidadian guy who just graduated from the school, so you know he already got my number, and he gave us a call, and he says, would you like to work for DNV? I just sat around doing nothing. I was like, yeah, sure, no problem. You know, I was still young. Someone calls me up and offers me a job. Yeah, sure, no problem. I didn't I didn't think twice, you know. And you know, I heard about DNV while working. There was, you know, I knew it was. They taught us about Lloyd's Register. They spoke about Lloyd's Register quite a bit
Mhm.
in university, and I knew DNV was like a competitor, but I didn't know much about them. I knew that they were just a competitor.
Yeah.
So you know, started to do research and whatever, and what I thought was, okay, let's you know, go to the office and continue doing the same thing I did at Tsunami. It was completely different. I,
A bit more
I got
structure.
into it. It was a little more structure. It was a lot more structure. Um, I, I got into the office. You know, had my interview. Went to Miami to do my final interview. Got the job. I got into the office. I was like, okay, good. So I'm in a new company in Trinidad. What I thought was a new company in Trinidad. I quickly got shipped off to Korea. And I had no, my wildest dreams, I had no idea that I would have ended up
Mhm.
in Korea. You know, I think I was I think I was 20 at that time.
Right.
And, you know, off to do new builds. And
How does that like 20 years old off to do new builds? Like how do you feel? are people trying to like? There must be. I can imagine only people are obviously trying to pull the wool over your eyes, left, right, and centre, and like how do you? Obviously, you'd imagine you'd be working with someone, but how does it actually work out? Seeing you're that young and obviously a recent grad and all that stuff.
So um, I would say that, what Tsunami taught me in that short space of time, it was roughly 6 months I worked for Tsunami. It actually opened my eyes to the world of work. And then, to propagate that to DNV. DNV had I would say DNV structure and how they onboard people was like is second to none.
Mm.
They had everything so structured. You had a buddy who would work with you. You had a leader of the group who would train you up to wherever you came. So you were never alone, and you were more or less you're considered to be a trainee,
Hmm.
and they had a plan for a trainee. Not like there are many companies worldwide who just bring you in and then it's a sink or swim. There was that DMV wasn't like that, so it was a very structured way of coming into it, going to Korea. Everything was planned out. Everything was well, curated for you to succeed. So it wasn't a deep jumping off into the deep end. I'm very thankful for that being over there, completely. I lived in England, but being over in Korea as well and China was it's a little difficult, and but
Yeah,
DNV made sure and set us up for success for that.
brilliant, brilliant. So how long were you on the kind of trainee plan then? How long were you part of that before you went
So it
full
was
on?
a 6 month. It was a 6 month training plan, and the plan was you had to follow a couple of vessels, from start to finish. And what you do is you build up your. They had something called a VQSC, which is Veritas Qualification Scheme. Uh, can't remember the C word,
Yeah, yeah.
but
No judging.
but it's a long time ago.
Yeah.
And so what that did is you went out, you did surveys, you came back, you gotten questions like homework to do, you answer those questions, and you kind of you continue to build up, and what at the end the idea was for you to get those qualifications so you could go back out into your various areas and contribute actively. So it was a very structured approach
Wow.
for following those new buildings over that 6 month period. So I followed two of them because I had a international driver's license and no one else in my group had one. So I owned the car. So they sent me out to, I was doing it at Hyundai Samo shipyard. So that vessel, the vessel over there was a container vessel, sorry, a car carrier slash gunro vessel. And then in Daejeon shipyard, I was following a tanker for Greek owner. So I was going back and forth to two places.
That's class, and I suppose it's a decent drive. So you obviously spent. I'm not one to obviously just hop on because we are going back a good bit, but you were nearly a decade with DNV. And again, you were a bit everywhere, weren't you? So you did Spain. You were obviously back in States. You're still in the States just now, aren't you? You still Fort Lauderdale or
Yeah, yeah, I'd settled in Texas. So
Texas? You
moving.
Texas, right? Good man. So in terms of the DNV wise, then, so what? How did that? Were you hoping that you'd go right through? Were you ambitious when you were younger, or were you just kind of feeling your way through and seeing what happened?
At DNV, am I transitioning to
No, no. So
thing?
just when you were in DNV, so obviously you were there for, as I was saying, you were there for nearly a decade. Um, were you quite ambitious when you were in there, or did you just keep things just kept moving up, moving along nicely?
No, I was always ambitious. I was always looking for ways to push my way to the top. Um, so you know, I I when I was in Trinidad, moved from Trinidad to Miami, got involved in a lot of things that I wasn't supposed to get involved
Yeah.
in the first place. And just constantly pushing the limits of it. And I really did that over in New Orleans. So I worked with worked on the ships and operations side, so pre-existing vessels, doing a lot of inspections. Started to really get involved with clients and stuff. So they had me as like a pseudo technical service manager who would
Right.
go out to those vessels. So when I did a lot of my inspections, I didn't just do an inspection and walk away, or survey and walk away. I used to sit with the crew, explain to them why things shouldn't be this way and what are the possible ways of overcoming some of these issues.
Yeah.
And a lot of these people really like that. McDermott being one of those companies. And at DMV, just constantly pushing that. He ended up as a deputy station manager. As at DNV was one of the things that happened. But it also helped me move on from DNV because of the level of service that I offered.
Yeah, okay. No, and it's good. I mean, the whole part, one of the whole points of the podcast is for people that are either younger or more junior in their career and they're looking to obviously make moves and might not know, because that's the thing with the industry. It doesn't really matter what your background is. There's so many different avenues that you can kind of pursue and chase.
That's
So then,
correct.
so you obviously before you left. Oh no, sorry. When you did, so you went into. Um, did you join the IMCA prior to? Was that after? How did that work out?
So I could actually build up to the MCA it's a committee, but so moving on from DNV to McDermott. Um, I actually got called from McDermott to join them.
Right.
Reason being, I was doing I was a surveyor on board their vessels. I was doing interacting with the crew, making sure that the superintendent is kept abreast and just really pushing, good customer service. So McDermott called us over to them. At McDermott, they just continued doing the same thing, propagating that thing and trying to
Mm.
push the limits and trying to push customer service, trying to push technical, being that person to be called upon.
How do you do
Um,
that? How do you go about doing that?
so what I normally do is I don't stay. And there are a lot of people who go to the office and this is their job. 9 to 5. This is what I do. I get involved in other things. I ask questions. I ask what else can I do. If I see something that is defunct, I go about trying to fix it. I'm going to be the one who's coming up with a solution. So I present several solutions. When I go into my manager's office, with a problem, I always present the solution as well and, bounce it off him. So he kind of built some trust in me to go and take on much more projects, so it just developed that type of approach to things. It didn't seem, it wasn't a job for me, it was a passion. And
Yeah.
I just took that with me, from DNV all the way along with my career, always trying to get into stuff, always trying to fix, the global problem and seeing how I can get that, rectified and just taking the joy from that, seeing something that is working. I always say that I like to see things run as a well-oiled engine. To
Mhm.
the point where you don't need me anymore. I've worked myself out of a job type of thing. So that approach.
Ah, good man. And did that come from, did that came, obviously, you said your dad obviously had quite a pretty awesome job. Did that kind of come from family? Or did that come from like any mentors that you had when you were in DMV?
It was a bit of both, actually. My dad, he always pushed, the agenda of, you know, being that person, always showing up, always never giving up, always trying to fix something, he was what I took with me. He passed away when I was in my 20s. I was in Miami when he passed away. He was so interested in my degree that he learned my degree along with me.
Wow.
So he was sat next to me. He would fly over to the UK to sit next to me, and he would be reading the same textbooks I'm reading so that he could have a conversation with me
That's
because
amazing.
he wanted to be part of it, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I joke, frequently joke with my uncle because I talk with my uncle a lot to just try to keep that relationship with my father through his eyes. And he usually joke. He said that he could have also gone for that degree as well if he wanted to. You know,
Yeah. He'd have probably outscored you.
he probably will. He probably will have
What was your dad's
outscored
name,
me.
Kyle?
Cecil Pemberton.
Cecil. Nice one, man.
Yeah,
Nice one. That's
yeah,
that's that's incredible. That's like top level dad stuff, really, isn't it? That's what you're kind of modeling on.
yeah, yeah. I've taken that with that from my dad, and I'll do it with my son as well.
Yeah.
You know, we sit together, we try to figure it out. Let's
Yeah.
figure it out together.
What
And
age is your
so
son?
he's 13. Yeah,
13, all right. So he's getting into the kind
yeah,
of it's getting a wee bit more complex at school and stuff.
yeah. I believe you me. I went in to do some algebra with him, and I was quickly humbled.
Yeah. It's good though.
Yeah,
Keeps you on your toes.
yeah. I, I was sitting down there trying to figure out something, and then quickly, if well, not quickly, but eventually, I threw in the towel, and I took a snapshot, and I asked ChatGPT to help me out. It's
Uncle GPT.
yeah, yeah, yeah. My
Brilliant,
son,
man.
he was laughing at that. He was laughing.
That's good though. But again, it just shows a bit of humility. So I think so when you were with McDermott, this is actually where I can remember our conversation at the start. So was it the Amazon? Was it the Amazon, the vessel, the cable layer? So this
Yeah.
is obviously so randomly that I remember going down, I think I was going down to visit Calmac, I think, in the it was alongside down in Greenock. And obviously it just had the
Mhm.
carousel on it, and I was just like, oh, that's an absolute beast. And looked up, and then we got talking after that, and was like, yeah, yeah, I had that. I was like, no way, man. Small world.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
crazy.
Yeah. That was the premier. Well, it is the premier vessel for McDermott. Um, I I took over that vessel in Singapore.
Right.
It went out right after McDermott purchased it, and I was tasked with alongside another guy. He was more in, doing like a lot of the field work and stuff, and making sure that the vessel was ready to go. But I was also involved from uh, you know policy, putting together policies, putting together stuff, documents, and talking with the necessary authorities to make it a McDermott type of vessel. So I got it from Gibraltar flag to Malta flag, working with DNV to build up the plan maintenance to ensure that the vessel is ready to go. So, I have a connection with that vessel, a very, very deep connection with that vessel because that was my first baby,
Right, right.
really, really.
Was it a
So,
big
and then
baby?
she's a big baby indeed. And I also, she was red when she was over
Yeah,
in Scotland and
that's right. Yeah.
down in
Yeah.
Singapore,
Yeah.
and she worked as she was actually funny enough. She was the largest dive vessel in the world.
Jeez.
Yeah,
I
at
I
one
remember seeing
point,
it. You
and
could see it for miles. Like it's quite flat, kind of along there, and you could see it for miles. I
mm,
tell a lie. I wasn't going to see Kilmac. One of my friends used to play for Greenock Morton, and we were going
mhm,
down. And I was funny enough talking about dad. I was with my dad, and it was my dad that clocked it first when we were driving. So we're going to watch the football, soccer, obviously for yourselves. But I know your football, obviously Trinidad. But we we're driving down. I was like, "Geez, this thing's enormous, man." It was like, couldn't believe the size of it. And then obviously, because it's obviously from my perspective, like coming in, that was probably quite early in my recruitment side of things then, and just we just seen the size of the carousel, and then obviously we were going down. It was like every other week, and I was there for a couple of months, I believe. I can't remember how long it was there, but it was there for a while. Um, but yeah, sorry, I interrupted there, but yeah, it was a
yeah,
gorgeous, gorgeous vessel, man.
Yeah, and you see the grand size. So the fact that my first gig as a manager, I got the biggest vessel in the fleet. Oh, that was what it wasn't the biggest vessel. I tell a lie. The DLV 2000 was the biggest, but
Right.
you know, just having the premier vessel though,
Yeah,
it was awesome. Yeah, she was my baby.
good man, good man. So obviously, again, then we're kind of getting into. So you've done. It's quite you've got quite an interesting career in terms of all the different things that you've done. So stayed as a vessel manager and went in obviously to Maersk Line. Did you work with who did you work with in Maersk there?
Um, so Maersk Line is the U.S. entity,
Yeah,
which is you watch everyone watched the movie Captain Phillips,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah, with Maersk Alabama. They are the ones who manage that vessel, you
Right.
know. So it was a I can't remember. There was a guy called Fasantha down over there in Virginia, and he was the director of the maritime side of it. And I worked with him and his group under his group. I was still in Texas at that time, and I worked out of Texas, did move to Virginia.
All right.
But they were doing a lot of like transportation of military cargo
Yeah,
back and forth. And there is a wide Maersk Line Limited and Maersk is two different entities. If there were to be any issues between the two, Denmark and USA, that they can easily break off and become its own entity. And so that's basically why, we were part of the big AP Mauler, but
yeah,
we were autonomous, had a certain level of autonomy,
right.
working for under hands-on CEO and stuff in over in Virginia and
Yeah,
Washington.
yeah, yeah. Awesome. So obviously, so again, it's like talking about your initial, what was a car carrier? You said sorry, it wasn't containers, but you're getting it kind of comes almost full circle, and then you off
Right.
you branched into the old drilling side of things. It's just like okay, why not?
Yeah, so if that was funny because I was quite happy at Maersk, ready to you know get into the world of containers, even though like containers is all pre-planned. Your routes are planned, and you know exactly where the vessel will be at any point in time. It was it I had to. Unfortunately, there was a point where I had to get leave and pack everything up in Texas and relocate to Virginia. And as having a family, it's quite difficult to
Mm.
uproot your full family and move to a different location. My wife, funny enough, she works for DNV right now as their HSC. Yeah, it's crazy how the things work out. She worked for Lloyd's Register, now she works for DNV. I had no idea she's going to end up in the
Yeah,
maritime
yeah.
industry at any point, but here she is. She's their HSC person. And
What did she do with the
you know,
MV?
she's their HSC,
Oh,
regional
HSC.
HSC analyst or specialist, or so she's in charge of the North America area for HSC.
Superb, superb.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
yeah, back onto the drilling side. So you obviously you weren't going to up sticks, and then wanted to obviously you need to move
yeah,
on.
yeah. So I applied for a position at Noble Drilling. Um, I was on the technical maintenance side, and I got my rejection letter from them. So I was like, okay, no problem. I'm quite happy here. One thing I normally do is I continue to keep my name in the market. I always throw my name into different baskets just to keep things fresh, right? So I got a rejection letter, thought nothing of it. But then what happened was the technical manager at that point in time, he saw my CV and he saw that what I've amassed over that period of time on the regulatory side and amongst other things. And that he took my CV and he sent it over to the director of the marine side, who's in charge of all of that. So they said, okay, well, this guy's CV is pretty good. He may not be ideal for the technical side of things, but we could surely use him. So they
Yeah.
give us a call, and they made me an offer. I was actually in Virginia at that point in time. And they said, let's get you over to Noble Drilling. Let's do it. What would you like? And I stated what I wanted out of a salary and everything, and they made it work. So off I went over to Noble Drilling, and it was Noble Drilling was a very interesting period. I remember my first week at Noble Drilling, there was a situation that happened in the Gulf of Mexico, and I was already on a helicopter with a whole bunch of executives over in Noble, heading out to that vessel to have an initial look at the vessel.
Yeah.
So, and then that just launched me into doing a lot of things. And one of the things that I looked after at Noble was with Noble was doing their merger with Maersk
Mm.
Drilling. They said, hey, they need someone to look after the compliance side of things for that merger, making sure that the vessels don't go back to shore. As soon as they merge, day one, they said, okay, we launch as Noble Maersk or whatever. At that point in time, I wasn't sure what the name of the company would be. But they wanted someone to just look after all these things, including what it will cost to paint those vessels to the colors of Noble and whatever. So I had a whole bunch of people I was dealing with. I was dealing with a lot of execs, the lawyers. I was dealing with accounts. I was dealing with finance,
Mm.
and I just had to put together this whole like decision tree to ensure that everyone was involved, to ensure that before we make any decision that everyone had a say. And and eventually I moved on to SEACOR, but that got translated and they got built up by people who came after me, and they started to they probably build their own thing out of it, but it was definitely the groundwork for that merger to happen, and
Mm.
to push that agenda along.
See, just to go back to, so you're saying your first week there that you're obviously there's an incident and then you're away with execs. It could be quite a daunting situation because obviously you don't want to exude too much confidence that you know exactly what you're doing, but at the same point you don't want to you need to get the lay of the land and kind of work out what's going on. How did you kind of deal with that? Did you feel the pressure, or were you just like I'm just going to kind of feel my way through this, or
No, I went back into surveyor mode, right?
yeah,
So the execs were there, but it was of no consequence to me at that point. I was more excited to get on the rig
yeah, yeah,
and do so. You know, again, my position there was to be eyes and ears, but to also help where necessary. But what I did was I got into my coveralls and I started walking around, obviously being careful and doing what I was, making sure that whatever rules and company right rules were followed. But I was out on doing my own assessment, taking pictures and sending it back. I did a report and I sent it back to the office. It wasn't necessary for me to do a report, but I did a report anyways, and I sent it back
yeah,
to the office because what was my value added? What was my deliverable for me being there? I had to create a deliverable, so I did that.
yeah,
And I didn't send it to the execs. I sent it back to the office, and I don't know if it was sent up, but I believe it was sent up, and it was sent back to them, and they saw me in a different light, right?
right,
They didn't see me as someone who was just going to sit there and collect a day rate or whatever, just
yeah,
being
yeah.
out on the rig.
No, good on you. It goes back to everything you're saying with your time in DNV, and I suppose just take taking ownership of it, really, isn't it? It's just like what's your deliverable, and if you don't really know if you'll get a deliverable, then you can create one rather than the holiday. Brilliant. And then
Right.
obviously, so so obviously the last few years we've had a few conversations and stuff. So when you joined obviously SEACOR and you took a kind of step up and into management and then obviously into VP. So you've well earned, I would say, for 100%. I'll say that very
Thank you.
much well earned. But how did you take, just same as everyone else, take it in your stride, or were you excited?
Yeah.
You are excitable anyway, which is a good thing. You're passionate about the industry, but it must have been a nice offer to get, and you're like, yes, here we go.
So moving into SEACOR, I had no idea that it would take me to the point of becoming the vice president. I actually was quite excited because I was brought in and I was given the a task of pushing the digitalization and the decarbonization route for SEACOR and the prowess, and I was passionate about that.
Mm.
So again, I went in there and I created my own deliverables. So I got involved in a lot of the decarbonization talks, meeting with vendors, putting together different ways. I used to sit down and have the wildest ideas, and I will go out and build up a whole document, and I'll present it to the manager, the VP at that time, a guy called Tim Clare. Um, and I'll just present him with different ideas, and he'll always say, "I'll be like, all right, Kyle, you know, take it easy, you know." So but I was so passionate about decarbonization, and then the digitalization part fell into my lap, and it was the guy, the predecessor before me, he left, he moved on to another company. He brought it to this like awesome point of where the company is in terms of its digitalization, and I had free runway to take it and turn it into whatever I wanted to turn it into. So, and I quickly understood digitalization was a major step to decarbonization, because how can you decarbonize if you don't know what you're doing? So
Yeah,
I took that on, and I started to work on even like developing my own calculation for CII,
right.
and working with a company called Spinergy. I presented my CII to them, and they scrutinized it. And funny enough, I saw one of Spinergy's engineers looked on my LinkedIn profile to see who the hell I am.
Yeah.
It could be like, who is this? Who's this idiot? Or it could be like, oh, this guy is coming up with some sort of his own calculations. But we had a lot of SEACOR had a lot of input into the development of Spinergy's CII, and all credit to Spinergy on their development. What they did was they took one of IMCA's proxies, they had proxy A and proxy B, and they developed this their own CII, which was based on activity modes, because of different vessels in the offshore industry. So the offshore industry is a very small industry compared to the what IMO thinks.
Mm.
However, in reality, it's its own world, right? And so many different vessels doing so many different things. So we found that it was important to capture all of that. And like actually we actually had Spinergy present the CII calculation to IMCA, and IMCA was, last time I checked, IMCA was actually pushing that agenda to get it over to the IMO for them to consider it for the offshore industry.
Mm.
So that's one of the things, just being passionate about things, and
Yeah.
always getting involved in other things, and seeing where that takes you and how far it could go. And, that took me very far in terms of things. And then moving into my boss called me in, and said to me he planned to retire.
Right.
Came out of nowhere, so
Mm.
I was completely blindsided by it. And and then sure enough, he told me, you know, what I need to do is continue doing what I do, but the intention is to make me a vice president.
Mhm.
You know, so
Awesome.
uh,
The
yeah,
biggest compliment, it's going to be the biggest compliment ever from the person that's in the job that you get it. Really, let's be
yeah,
honest.
yeah, and that came soon after. Uh, and continue the decarbonization, digitalization stuff. Um, with really good people. There was a guy who I worked with. I don't say he worked for me because he was definitely instrumental in a lot of things. A guy called Michael Kowalski. And we ran that whole engineering department
Right.
for SEACOR. Um,
What kind of things did you put in place then? What would you say is your kind of the proudest moments that you've got in terms of like what you've implemented for digitalization wise or decarbonization?
so we had the our sustainability report that we well SEACOR puts out every couple of years, and we had to report a lot of the scope one, scope two stuff, and I I sat alone
Mm,
and I came up with a way to report it, albeit I had help from Spinergy to do scope one reporting, but the scope two stuff I came up with. I was up on the website because scope two is buildings and everything, and I started to put together a spreadsheet of using different calculations from different organizations to come up with our way of reporting scope two.
right.
And it took me like about a week to come up with. And sure enough, the following year or the year after that, I went back and I looked at that spreadsheet, and I had absolutely no idea of how I got to that point. So it it's what took me 1 week to come up with and to do that reporting, which actually got uh SEACOR a lot of awards at various award shows. Um, it took me for 2 years later. It took me what 3 or 4 weeks to try to figure out what the hell I did.
Amazing, but isn't it? Because
So,
obviously if you're starting from ground and then you're incrementally getting there and then going back, you're like, where was ground?
so what I did was, I worked against myself because on that spreadsheet, I I, I white out a whole bunch of stuff, so that you wouldn't see, so the spreadsheet would look nice
Right.
and clean and clear. And what I didn't do was I didn't put any instructions of how I did things and whatever. So I'm
Right,
looking
right.
at the spreadsheet, and then some of the fields I just enter the number rather than enter the formula.
Ah,
So
right.
I was like, how did I come up with this? So it took me. I had to reverse engineer it, but I
Yeah.
did. I ended up reporting, and then last year I did the same thing. I thought, okay, I have all the instructions, I have everything here, and then I started to do reporting. It's like, what did I do? But it took me less time though because I had some instructions to figure it out. But that's I think getting SEACOR a lot of the awards, and Michael Kowalski, yeah, he worked on a closed bus a hybrid vessel the year before, and that actually won us a couple of awards as well. And it's all credit to him, but it's also my department. So it's something that I was proud of
Yeah,
for
100%.
what we did.
100%. And then we find us in modern day. I'm conscious of time here as well. Don't want to keep you too long, but so right now, obviously, you're the hitman for hire, essentially. AI
Yeah, that's,
execution.
that's yeah, dropped out of the maritime industry and I
Brilliant. So obviously, and the thing is, like for anyone listening, and this is again what it's all about. going from security and going into obviously taking the dive. I know so many people that I've spoke to over the years that are like, I kind of want to do it, but I'm not sure. And if you've spent, which you obviously have, like the best part of 20 years earning a salary, and then obviously going out on a limb and going to go for it, it's naturally daunting. But how are you finding it? What kind of work are you wanting? Are you winning, or what are you going after? What's your goals with it?
So, I'm going to be open. The departure from SEACOR was a push, right? It wasn't it 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 ended up being cyclical. Things happen, at that level of company. You have you know if it doesn't go in your direction, then basically you no longer have a position, right? So that was a push. But I always had a desire to go out and do something on my own. I formed this company, Magnum Maritime, back in 2020, and I just had it as a S corp, just sitting there not doing anything. So um, that push actually got me to dust off the documents, see where the company is in terms of what um what needs to be set up properly, what did I not do, what I need to do, this, that, and the other. And then, just going out and really putting myself out there. So, what I found was when I opened a company in 2020, um, there was not much of a bit of a reception because I was still, 6 years is
Yeah.
you could garner a lot. And I think now after going through a lot of that experience and building up that experience, building contacts, building a reputation, going back out there, it kind of gets a little easier for me is talking to people. So, what I try to focus on is decarbonization, digitalization, and try to push that agenda out
Mhm.
companies to put together a robust plan to achieve such. Also set up their organization for that, help them out with that. Um, just general doing surveys and stuff. I already had a one job out of France, helping a company understand what the owner's perspective is and how to successfully win business from an offshore company, helping also understand I put together a presentation looking at each sector in the maritime industry. I surprised myself actually because you're working in industry and you think that you don't know, but when you actually sit down and you put it on a pen to paper and you actually see, wait, I really do understand these industries. So I delivered, you know, uh, outlooks, vessel criteria and stuff like that to help that company understand their business development guys to understand what is necessary and what wins work for in the offshore industry. Delivered it to that company, and they're quite happy with it, and working on helping them develop more stuff on their side. So that's one of the stuff I do, and you know, I've started working with some flag states to do inspections, but that's
Mhm.
just the start of it. And knowing myself, I get involved in a whole bunch of stuff that I'm not supposed to get involved in. So stay tuned. We should have a part two.
You should be. No problem at all, man. No problem at all. You could probably have a part two in the next 6 months. You're going to have. Oh, that's great. That's great. So to be
Yeah.
fair, like so obviously we always you've already kind of hinted on it, but we always try and finish the podcast off with your first memory of the industry, whether it be a ship that you were aboard or something. But you alluded to obviously seeing was it a reefer or was it a container? I can't remember. Obviously when you were a kid, but what's your first memory of the industry? What's your first memory of anything to do with it?
Um, that's a really good question. Uh, my first memory of this industry was I was taking so there was an inter-island ferry. There is an inter-island ferry, as they call it, sea bridge between Trinidad and Tobago.
Mm.
And hopping on that vessel, driving. My mom drove the car onto to the vessel because it's a
Yeah, yeah.
conroe vessel and a ferry car, and we me sitting on it, and it was long. It was a long, long the transfer, but just being on that vessel and this sea being out in the open water, I just tried to get that back, that feeling back. You know, it definitely left an imprint on me,
Yeah, yeah,
just
that's
being
awesome.
on that ferry. And then that was my first time being out on the water.
Mm.
I was quite young actually. I can't remember the age I was, but I was really young at that point. But I think that was a trigger there, and then subsequent to that, just driving past the port. You can't help but drive past the port in Trinidad. It's
Yeah,
such a small place. Just seeing the vessels alongside, see the cruise ships come in and stuff like that. That actually piqued my interest.
yeah. No wonder. No, I've just you painted a picture. I can just picture the color of the water, the how beautiful it is. Mine was in a rainy day in the Clyde. A bit different, mate.
Slightly different, but same.
Same, but big time different. Kyle, mate, it's an absolute pleasure as always. Thanks so much for coming on. I think I asked you about maybe 2 years ago when it first obviously started. Now, obviously, you're in the midst of it, but I really, really appreciate you coming on, man. Great story and really, really touching, obviously, about your dad and stuff as well, mate. So well played and thank you.
Thank you very much, Gordon, for inviting me. I really appreciate the opportunity to tell my story. So thank you very much.
No worries, mate. Anytime, and definitely get you back for number two, part two.
Oh, looking forward to it.